walked away from what I knew, and it was scary, moving to something better. And I still do that in business today. Like right now, I'm trying to figure out some things in the businesses. And you have to give something up, right? You always have to give something up for something better. You might never get this back. You just get something better.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Elam
Here's what
King,
it
thank
is.
you so much for being here. I appreciate you. One of the first things that stood out about the story was getting to meet you in the group that we're in is about you were in an Amish community, and that
That's right.
is something that was very interesting because I'll be honest, there was only maybe one or two people in my 34 and some change years on Earth that I've met that have been in Amish community, and definitely not that have been in, let me go build a real estate empire as well. And so that was super interesting. And I knew from the brief chat we had before, just like, wow, this is you're a really cool dude. So tell me a little bit about what was that experience like? Growing up in an Amish community. I've got so many questions, but tell us a little about that.
Well, I'll say this before I actually, answer the question before I get into the story. I feel like it's a story that I am obligated to tell. And that is because it is a story, first of all, but it's also a story that's not very common and people enjoy the story. And we are, as human beings, we are enriched by someone else's journey and their story. So I'm making it more of a goal this year to get my story out. Did I mention to you the whole concept of from Amish to 100X?
You did, and I did want to ask about that too. I thought that would have been more about maybe an impact type of thing. But if you want to explore it now, you want to talk about that, go for it.
Yeah, I can get into that a little bit more. But what Amish to real estate, although there's a lot of Amish getting into real estate now, it's actually very interesting. Real estate does take a level of understanding, and if you're an agrarian society, changing from agriculture to buying real estate as a business is a bit of a mindset shift. But there's a lot of the younger generation now, and others that are getting very keenly interested. So the Amish are very, very entrepreneurial, and they are in essence uninhibited when it comes to trying things.
Okay, that's interesting.
You have no experience, you can't do that. Huh? Well, I'm going to go do it to get the experience.
Right, exactly.
And it's not even in a boastful way. Like, I'll give you another example. I asked someone that's partnering with us on a deal, says, hey, could you send over a bio of yourself to give to the bank to give us more of a,
background,
a stronger ask. I'm not comfortable with that. And I understand it. I don't know all his specific reasons, but I understand it because I grew up that way and I get it. And my response was, okay, fine. I get it. I respect that. That does not translate into American society.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the case with him. It's just, what is it? One, we don't toot our own horns as much.
Toot and horns? Toot your own horns. Got it. Yeah. Don't want to be boastful, that kind of stuff.
Correct. Toot your own horn, that's a common phrase in this part of the world, but might be a Lancaster County thing.
No, we've heard, yeah.
But yes, don't toot your own horn. Not exposing yourself unnecessarily, although, Yeah, I'm not sure what it all is,
Let's
but yeah, there's a couple. But anyway, that's just part of the Amish culture. And one of the things I have had to learn in business is you have to talk about yourself and lay out your justification
mm-hmm.
for things. People won't just trust you.
Right.
In the Amish community, what you say is what stands. Much, much, much more. But anyway, I'm getting into the cultural aspect of it. But back to
No,
my
I
journey.
think they're both important. I appreciate that, you laying that out, because I mean, in in a timeline sense, they kind of are one and the same, right? Some of your journey and the culture, and so helping to paint that
Yeah,
picture. Follow on questions
it's part of the
for me
fabric.
would have been, well,
Yeah.
what are some of the cultural things? What are some of the misconceptions? So if you can, sort of weave that into, describing, your journey too, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. People often ask me, hey, Elam, I watched this video, or that video, or whatever. Amish Mafia. I've never watched it.
Me
I
either.
probably should. Uh, well, there's different ones out there, and people are like, so that's true, Elam, right? No. And the common understanding is the Rumspringa part, which is after you turn 16. Then you go out and you sow your wild oats, and then you decide whether you want to come back to the Amish
Mm.
church or not. Not true. An element of truth, but I never sowed my wild oats. I was always very conservative, and then I turned 20, and then for whatever the timing, this is part of the story. Uh, Rather than starting sowing my wild oats at 16, I was very conservative, and that's what the more conservative people. That's kind of the story. Now, what it is you're joining other young people and just spending Sunday afternoon and evening together, right? Um, but for me, I guess I started sowing my wild oats. All that wasn't that when I was 20, because it was a spiritual journey. I realized that my spiritual well-being is not going to be it's not going to happen continuing in the Amish culture. And I'm a bishop's son and an influential bishop. So this was like county wide with, the Lancaster County settlement here. Everyone was talking about this Elam King guy who just went bananas.
Yeah,
Okay, maybe
yeah,
not everyone, but a
yeah.
lot of people. Now, I'm not trying to paint a negative picture about Amish, because I still have a lot of respect for my background. In fact, I still say I am Amish and I'm proud of it. And I am. Obviously, I left it. Obviously, I left some things behind because I felt that was the right thing to do. Where was I
Well,
going with this thing?
talk to me about, you're starting to paint a picture here of around 20 or so is,
Oh
but
yeah,
also,
yeah.
for a little bit of contrast, again, myself included, there's definitely some ignorance, right? And probably I'll just ask the question for many of the listeners as well. What what was the day-to-day type of stuff that was when you're saying you left the Amish? What did you leave? Like, what was that day-to-day stuff? Right. And you talked
Mm-hmm.
about some of the culture. I mean, conservative, depending on who you're talking to, widely means different things. And
Of
when
course.
you're saying so,
On the conservative end of the spectrum for the Lancaster
yeah,
County
and when
Amish.
you say sow your wild oats, well, I might have a completely different idea than you. So, is that
Yeah.
having your first beer, or I don't know. I'm just
Right. Yeah. I did not sow my wild oats. That wasn't the motivation. In fact, when I on my way out, so there's the excommunication part that they practice, and it's a process in the Amish church. Well, they had a very hard time with me because I wasn't doing anything wrong,
okay.
except for one thing. I started going to a different church on Sunday morning at times.
Hence the spiritual journey aspect.
That
So before we
correct.
get into that, talk to me about some of the day-to-day things. Like, what was it like?
Yeah. So back to that. So a typical day to day. So Amish culture is very structured, and it's actually a good thing. Um, I know that especially Americans, we can think it's a negative. It's not. I'm here to defend it. It's a good thing. Might have problems, but so does American
Mm-hmm.
culture, right? Um, but on a Sunday morning, you could pretty much set your clock to, well, not quite, but I'm exaggerating. But you had a certain time of singing, and then you had a certain time of preaching, and then you had a certain time of all those things, and it was
Mm-hmm.
timed. And here's a little bit of a negative thing. So a lot of people sleep during church,
Okay.
but there's a very, very small queue, and you wake up and they go from standing to on their knees or sitting. All that stuff is so ingrained year after year after year of doing this that you do it by
Sure.
habit. Like, time to wake up. Okay, change your posture, whatever. All those things. So that's a day to day for church life, but a day to day as far as on the farm. Every morning at was it 6 o'clock? I think so. There's time to milk the cows, and the same thing in the evening, every single day.
Got it. Got it.
And then of course there's always field work, which that you kind of worked around the weather. But if you were on the fields, you were making repairs on something.
Repairs on something.
Yeah, like the
Okay.
building. Like, hey, you had lots of buildings. There's or equipment or something. There's always things to do. But that was a huge part of it. It's just the day to day taking care of the
Got it.
cows. In fact, when I left, so we had a diesel that ran a vacuum pump that ran the milk machines for milking the cows, right? So every single morning and every single evening, that diesel was running, and you would hear this. And so when I left, I went through culture shock, major culture shock, and that was one of the
Not
things.
hearing it anymore.
I not hearing it. Yes, there was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Like, but that's how we were wired as humans. We have those things that we attach ourselves to, and then when it's removed, it's destabilizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I can remember moving from Hawaii to Seattle and all the other places to move for sure. So the day to day was that 6 a.m. whatever it was, sun up, right? Going to take care of the cattle, right? And then
Yep.
it sounds like if not that, then working with around through the weather around different repairs that had to be done
Yep.
to sort of maintain and keep on progressing life is that in the community. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you had school too when you were school age and all those different things. But yeah,
Awesome. Okay. You know one of the questions before we get to sowing your wild oats is
and I want to be clear, I never did that. Okay, but it looked that way to some people because I left
sure.
the Amish, right?
What are some of the misconceptions that people have about Amish? And let me tee up a couple that maybe I've heard or I've seen or whatever hearsay type of stuff is technology, whatever technology is electronics and stuff doesn't really get used much. But you talked about diesel. I'm like, okay, well, generators, but like, where's the line? And then other things might be I think I had read something about only going to school up to a certain grade level or something. Um,
Yep,
uh,
yep. Eighth
yeah.
grade,
So
and then I got my degree after
yeah,
I left.
talk to me about those parts. That like what
Yeah.
are some misconceptions? Those things, maybe some other misconceptions that you have heard out there. You're like, nah, dog, that's not how it is.
Well, probably the things I've heard the most are things that are a little bit true, but they're understood in an
Sure,
extreme. So I'll give you an example. The Amish don't use technology. Not true.
sure.
Inside secret, not true. It is not
Okay.
true. They are in their own way, they're very technology driven. It's almost
Mm.
admirable. They're just really good at getting around at tweaking technology to stay within the Amish expectations. Ordnung is what the church ordnung is what they
Church.
call it. Ordinances
Oh,
would be probably a similar, English word. Um, so, for an example, you're not supposed to have electric, right? You're not supposed to be connected
Okay.
to the grid. So you buy a diesel that runs a generator that runs a no. You buy a diesel that runs an alternator that charges a battery that runs an inverter that produces electric.
Okay. Wild.
And you
so
have electric. It's just not
so
connected to
what's
the
the
grid.
what's the line? Like it's not supposed to use technology. Like what's the mandate? What's the ordinance?
So that is in there's the truth is, so a very traditional culture, right? And in modern society, so a lot of things get gray, right? Especially if they interact with the broader world. So the electric part is definitely a gray area. No, you're not supposed to have electric. And it's like, well, okay, you're not supposed to be connected to the
Got it.
grid. So that's one of those areas where they have kept a pretty clean line.
Who makes those calls? The gray. Okay. That says a lot.
Yeah. Um, a mixture of the bishops and cultural pressures.
Got it.
So, for an example,
Yeah.
cell phones. Where I'm in Lancaster County area, a lot of them have it. The bishops tried to stop it, but man, how are you gonna? Because they're so small, you can put it in your pocket, right? And no
Yeah.
one ever knows. And it becomes more common and more common and more common, and now it's too
Right.
late. And I want to say this: all this, I have the greatest deal of respect for my background, my tradition. Yeah. This is, one of my fears is that if an Amish person would listen to this, they would find it offensive the way I'm talking about it. I am not saying in a negative way. I am saying it actually in a positive way. I kind of respect it still. Even though I've left it, there is a lot of good there, and I have a lot of admiration for some of the culture. But it is some of those things where it's the ability to kind of get around it and still follow the letter of the law.
Totally. And
they're geniuses. They're super good at it.
I'm not trying to, ask anything controversial or I'm just curious, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. I'm not it's great.
Okay.
What was the question again?
Some of the day-to-day things or maybe misconceptions that you've heard, about options. You talk a little bit about technology and how, it gets used a little bit more. You mentioned the 8th grade aspect. So that there's truth to that, or is that the actual grade level, or it's about 8th grade?
Yeah. And here's the thinking is, and this is general American society could really benefit from this type of thinking. This is one of the areas where I'm super proud of my background. Sure, every culture, every background, tradition has its own flaws, but I think this is an area where it's a major strength. Is the belief is you learn how to work by doing, not just sitting in an ivory tower cramming information in your head. Bingo.
Got it.
How many people are spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in college trying to figure out what they want to do in life? And then they don't even use it.
I completely hear you. Yeah.
So the Amish, they just keep it simple. Go to work.
So get to a level where you're competent, read, write, think, problem solving, can, functionally there, and then get to work. Life skills. What do you need to?
Correct.
Yeah, I wouldn't say on the job training. It's life skills, right? From there, it's you're able-bodied. You can do stuff.
Well, it's also on the job training. You learn the trades by, or I don't mean the trades as in real estate trades, but just you learn how to work. You learn how to do things by working alongside your dad or other people and just literally doing it. Now, the downside, and I'll be quick to say this as well, the downside is I have needed to educate myself more just to be able to think more clearly about stuff and think on a higher level. that's where the cap sometimes is. So Amish people make great workers, but it takes a little bit of additional training to actually think on an executive
Can you give me an
level.
example of something that you had to teach yourself to get there?
Well, I still struggle with just completely not getting my hands into whatever. I think I'm doing pretty well, but it's a bit hard for me. Rather than just like putting together a clear job description or a checklist for someone, here, go do this, as opposed to, well, I'll just do it myself. So that now that's a bit of a mindset, I guess. Now I feel like I feel like I'm mostly through that, but that was just something I had to work against. Um,
You mean that from the perspective like a on that one like a managing and leading someone else type of thing, or yeah,
yeah,
I would agree that
yeah,
that's maybe a little bit more learning to delegate, learning to teach and stuff like
yeah.
that. I think everyone has to learn a little bit about that. um,
Well, I learned a lot about computers. In fact, I took some courses just computers because, well, I didn't learn that
mm-hmm.
growing up. But it's a skill, it's a knowledge base that can be very very helpful.
Right, probably not pulling up YouTube next to how do you fix this thing on the side of the house.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. YouTube, I just figured it out myself. But I'm serious. The Amish culture is very very skilled at hands
Yeah.
on. They're some of the most gifted people in being able to do stuff hands on. Here's actually one thing that I had to think differently. So, as an Amish person, you take each other at your word,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas, so let's say I'm raising capital, it's like, hey, this is a good deal. An Amish person might say, oh, great, I'm on. Where a general American society person might say, okay,
Show me.
show me.
Right.
But don't you trust me? That's it. I actually struggled with it at first when I kind of got the vibes from people. I was like, show me. Wait, do you think I'm
Right.
dishonest? No. That's not what people are communicating at all. It's just they're communicating that, show me. I want to be able to think
Yeah,
through this as
I'd
well.
love to. I'd love to believe you. Just give me a little more information. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah. But that is one of the areas where I had to learn from a like a legal and communication standpoint to not just make conclusions and assume people are going to believe you, but show how you got to your conclusions.
Got it.
And have legal and then with that also have legal paperwork. Like, you can't trust everyone.
You got to CYA that too, right? Because that works both
Yeah,
ways. Like, I guess
correct.
the counter argument or counter question would hold true too. Of were you so trusting that maybe things had happened to you? When you have first left the community, were you like, so and so says this, and you're like, oh yeah, of course, why would he lie?
I'm sure I'm not coming up with an incident right now. There's obviously nothing catastrophic, but um, I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you uh, gotten in trouble for, if anything? I mean, come on, there must have been something that you had gotten in trouble for growing up that was a, kind of a no-no that, oh my God, Mr. Elam King did.
I'm completely blanking. Well, actually, I thought about one thing. Just thought about it. I don't know that I got in trouble for it. Um, but I had a bit of an anger issue, which I'm not proud of that. Um, Thankfully, that was overcome in my whole journey. It actually kind of just disappeared. But I got angry at one of my dad's calves one time, and I had a hammer in my hand, and I threw it at it, and it hit it in the head, and it never quite
Oh,
recovered. I never told my dad because I was
yeah.
scared stiff. I would have gotten beat up for it. But yeah, but I was actually. People laugh when I tell them today. I was actually a pretty good
Mm-hmm.
kid, at least at heart. But I was also kind of a more aggressive, out there personality. So I kind of I caused a lot of problems for the teachers, but not outright naughty. I was just a
You're
mess
just
at
kind of
times.
angsty.
Yeah,
Were the
yeah,
schools on? I don't know what the correct terminology. Like, are they on campus? Are they on location, or are they within like the county? You mentioned Lancaster a couple times. Is it like the school off of the farm, or is there just a really big community of people that you grew up in?
yeah, yeah. So they have one room schoolhouses, um, and what 30 students or something like that. So once it gets too big, they just put another one. So I walked about a mile to school and back home, and uphill both ways
In the snow. Got it.
in the snow. Yeah, in the snow. Yeah. Here's actually a story. My wife still shakes her head. She's like, I can't believe it. I got whooping
Okay.
cough, not just a cough, but a whooping cough. When I was like 10 or something like that. No, 8, probably 8. And my mom had just given birth to one of my sisters, and so I guess she didn't have time to pay attention to it. But for about 2 weeks, I would walk to school and back from school just, and this was in the dead of winter. It was a really cold winter.
With whooping cough.
Just cough, yeah, coughing up a storm, and literally sometimes, yeah, coughing up more than just a storm. But
That's
yeah, so that's just a very resilient, tough culture.
yeah.
Um, and maybe that plays into who I am today when it comes to real estate, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me about that. So, let's make the bridge here of, 2020 ish, sowing your wild oats. And I still want to know what that means to you. And
Yeah, yeah. I skipped the wild oats. So the wild oats is really, um, it is not good stuff. In the true essence of, there might be drinking a bunch of other stuff. And I have friends who live that lifestyle a little bit. I did not. I was a very conservative. So for me, it was a spiritual journey, not like, oh, I want to leave the Amish. In fact, not being Amish wasn't part of the story. So, but yeah, then I left and then I worked in the trades for a number of years. And I went to Indonesia for a couple of years as a volunteer. I was actually teaching English. So from Amish to teaching
wow.
English. Talking about the 100x, just stepping back a little bit because this plays into the journey part of it. So, again, my journey was spiritual, and it was, God is very important in my life. And there's a Bible verse that talks about leaving father, mother, whatever, leaving everything, um, for spirituality. Then so if you leave it, you'll get it back 100 fold, which is
Mm,
100x. That's where I'm getting the
got it.
100x, right? Now I know Grant Cardone is 10x. I'm not just trying to outdo him.
Sure.
It's like this is what it
Yeah.
says, and that verse became very, very real to me, and in such a way that this is going to be my life. So I left my one father, one mother, right? Left all my friends, all my whole social network. From growing up Amish until I was about 20, I lost all of it. I lost pretty much everything except a couple of pieces of furniture, a couple of clothes on my back, and a couple of little things like that. Um, but today up to today, I have a lot of people that I, in some way, shape, or form, call a father or a mother. And there's a lady that I met 6 years ago at a convention, or we were actually part of a group, and we just got to know each other. We hung out a little bit, and so to this day, I still call her mom, and she calls
Yeah.
me son. So, and I have a number of those people, and that's where that 100x is coming in. I am believing that in my lifetime, I should keep an Excel spreadsheet, right? In my lifetime, I am going to have I'm going to acquire 100 father figures, 100 mother figures, plus all the other stuff in my life. I realized, and included in there is leaving land, leaving real estate. I already 100x that because I didn't own any before.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh, you know, so there's just a number of different things like that, and it's not for me. It's not. It's not even a parallel to Grant Cardone's 10x. It's a very. It's the idea of you give up one thing entirely, knowing that you may never ever get it back, but you get something else 100x. Now we all believe in those principles in business, but sometimes we can be in this thing, hey, I'm going to help you because I know down the road you're going to help me. I left the Amish not knowing if I would ever get anything back.
Yeah.
Although, except for that Bible verse that I was hanging on to.
Yeah. As you say that, the context of giving, quote unquote, giving up something to get 100x back. I mean, that makes sense from investing your energy perspective, right? And
Correct.
Thinking about that, like I suppose a true investor, like that long-term investor mentality would be versus transactional, which would be more short-term, as an example. But I think what comes to my mind here is, how do you reconcile, like, how do you combine this idea of, like, surely I would assume the Amish community wasn't like, well, if you give up us, then you'll get 100x back from us, right? Like, so
right.
you see what I'm saying? It's like,
there's none of that.
It's
right.
like, well, we wanted you to leave so that you get 100x back of this, and so I don't really understand how that scripture fits the leaving the original community part. Does that make sense?
Oh, well, I have a lot more friends today than I did back then, and better friends, I think.
Got it. Okay.
Even though I had some good ones, I just feel like I have, generally speaking, a better network than I did back then.
Okay.
Sure, and I don't. There's the pain of leaving your own mom and your dad. That can't be replaced, right? I'm not trying to minimize it, but it was more of a, I will be taken care
Understood.
of.
Yes.
Over and abundantly.
And that makes a lot of sense to me, especially from a tithing perspective, giving up, quote unquote, giving, a tenth to get that tenfold or, whatever return, right?
And I'm not under valuing my father, my mom. I'm not doing any of that. I'm not even thinking replacing.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. It's just sometimes when we give up something in one area, we may never get it back, but we might be enriched in a different area. And there's a part of me that was lost by leaving the Amish that I'll probably never get back, ever. But there's other areas where I'm getting a lot more.
How did it happen? Did you just, you have a little bit of furniture, some clothes on your back, and is it like, oh, you chose to go, so, take the cow and buggy, or,
Well, I didn't get a buggy. It was not mine because I was leaving.
Right.
But I had a friend that I got to know through this other church. I was like, hey, can you come help me load up my stuff? And yeah, I told my parents I'm leaving.
Devastation.
My poor mom. Devastating to my mom. But yeah, it was, and here was a big thing. My journey started when I was 19, but it was like, in the Amish culture, 21 is when you become completely an adult. So I honored that. And I actually didn't leave till about a year later. Like, literally, everyone knew I had left at heart, but I hadn't left physically. And then one day I just like, okay, I'm leaving.
Got it.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
dude, that's wild.
It was. but I still today use some of. So I walked away from what I knew, and it was scary, moving to something better. And I still do that in business today. Like right now, I'm trying to figure out some things in the businesses, and you have to give something up, right? You always have to give something up for something better. You might never get this back. You just get something better.
Make space.
So I'm still doing that in business today. It's like, okay, well, we just need to spend the money here. Sheesh, I want that. I don't want to give up that money, but well, we're gonna have to.
So let's pivot to that. We've been digging a lot into the story, which I appreciate, and can go, a lot deeper there too. Where do short-term rentals come from?
Yeah,
You're
right,
like,
right.
yeah, real estate. I know how to build this stuff. I know how to do these things. This is what I'm doing. Where you were learning about computers, and you're like, oh my god, real estate is the best thing ever. Let me let me dive into the Airbnb bubble. Or how did you pick this thing?
Yeah. I mean, shortly after we got married, we got married almost 8 years ago. I was like, they're renting, and I did not understand real estate. I don't know if I even knew what real estate meant.
Okay, got it.
I forget where I learned what that meant. I think I Googled
so you weren't
it.
so in one of the phones you smuggled, or what?
No. This was after I left the Amish. So this was 20 years ago. This journey started 20 years ago that I left the Amish. So yeah, no, I knew what Google was by then. Here's actually a funny one. Initially, shortly after I left, I'd ask questions, because that's how you learn in the community. You ask questions, and people would just say, "Go Google it." Huh? What's that? How do you do that? Go Google it. Anyway, so I was thinking.
That's awesome.
So as you might feel like you might feel naive about the Amish, sometimes I still feel naive about the greater world. But it's two different cultures.
For sure.
I'm not dumb. You're not dumb. It's just two different cultures. But yeah, so I wanted to. I was like, man, we're paying rent. It's like, well, hey, can we buy a property, but not have to pay for it, where it becomes an asset, not a liability? Now, I didn't know all those terms back then. I just later articulated, that's what I was doing. That was my thought process. So I heard about Airbnb, and I'm like, and this was 7. This would have been 7 years ago, something like that. Heard about Airbnb. I'm like, oh, could we Airbnb? Let me check it out. So I checked it out. I'm like, oh, so what if we buy a house bigger than what we need and rent some of it out? So I then this realtor brought this one house to us, 7 bedrooms, 3 exterior doors. And I'm like, oh, we can use this door. Guests can use that door, and we'll be cool, and then we'll make some money and this and that and the other thing. But it was a really bad foreclosure, and I got it for $54,000. You're not buying anything in Lancaster City for that price anymore. That's how much the price has gone up. Bought it for $54,000 and then rehabbed it. Spent a couple months rehabbing, and it was a pretty bad situation, to the point where sometimes I'm like, wait, did they get the bathroom and the closet mixed up? Like, what's going on here?
So hold on. What did you do for work or a job after you left the community? Like, were you working?
I was in the trades.
So you learned all of your different trade stuff. So you went to like construction or like things like that.
Framing, roofing, did some handyman stuff.
Got it. Yeah. So that's how you were earning income. Okay.
Correct. And then I went overseas for a while, and that would have been, donations. Then I came back, finished college, was doing some roofing at the time, but then I got into web
Why did you
marketing.
think to go to college?
It felt like the right thing to do. I had a major hunger to learn. I enjoyed college.
Got it. And so it was just, you knew that you knew what you knew. You had an idea of what you didn't know, and you just knew that there was this giant bubble of I don't know what I don't know. So let me dump into that.
Yeah, yeah. And my journey was very different from, a lot of people go to college to try to figure out what they want to do in life, right? I already knew. I was just going to college to get tools to help me
And
do it
what was
better.
that?
Um, I wasn't really thinking business back then. I was thinking more moving overseas to a third world country, but they want you to have some kind of expertise that you can bring. And by going to college, it gives you more expertise.
Okay, so business and or some kind of commerce, but TBD of what exactly that thing was.
Yeah, I wasn't even really thinking really business. I was thinking more like teaching English or something like that.
Okay, still had a few things to figure out, but you knew that you had that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right,
Yeah,
right. It wasn't like I don't know what I want to do with my life. It was more like I have a general
right.
trajectory. There's some details to work
Directionally
out.
correct,
But
so to
yeah,
speak.
correct, correct. So anyway, we bought this house and rehabbed it, and then put part of it on Airbnb. And I was like, whoa, this is doing a lot better than I thought it's going to. It's like, then I'm like, well, can we do a second unit in the house? We just closed doors, put up bookshelves, different things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Because we couldn't, the city wouldn't let us build a wall because we're making it multiple
Right.
apartments. Well, since we're living there, we could do what we want to. And we were, in the beginning, we had like 2 rooms to ourselves, the kitchen and a bedroom, or and a
Mm-hmm.
bathroom. And then we had another one that was full of storage, but we lived in very tight quarters. I think we moved in without a shower curtain. Just spilled water everywhere for the first little
Sure.
bit. We had to make it work. That's what it was, making it work. Um,
Yeah, got to do
yeah,
it. So you bought this place. It's foreclosure, 50 odd K or so, and because you had
yeah,
experience with the different construction trades and whatnot, you were able to basically fix it up and thought we have this room. So how can you rent it out?
yeah. Well, I did it. I did it the Amish way. Is you figure it out as you go. I mean, I had experience and I had drive and I had hunger for it, but there was a lot I didn't know. Like we went way over budget, not because we made bad decisions, but we didn't realize how much it would
Right.
actually cost.
Yeah.
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 So how did you do the second one? And I imagine the third one.
Yeah. Then the second one, what was that? Oh, yeah. A realtor brought it to me. It was close by. Well, first we got into arbitrage. So we rented properties from homeowners and then put them on Airbnb and kept, you made a spread, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's that. Um, then eventually it's like, well, we'd like to buy another property. Ironically, during COVID, when everyone was saying, well, not everyone, but some of my advisors were saying, Elam, don't you think you should wait till this blows over? And all due respect to them, I mean, I listened to it, but it's like, but I had to learn to reach my own conclusions. Sure, depend on your advisors, depend on different people in your life, but you still, at the end of the day, you're responsible for your
Mm-hmm.
decisions. Um, but anyway, bought the place for $80,000, put a couple grand in it for furniture, ran it for a year and a half, probably made $10,000-$15,000 on it, and then sold it for 130.
Got it. So just over double.
A year and a half later, from 80 to
Okay.
130, and I didn't even do capex improvements.
Very cool.
It was just over COVID, stuff went crazy.
And so you're running, it sounds like the arbitrage. So that turned into a property management type of thing as well, which is, pretty much part of it.
Correct.
So that's one arm of the business. At this point,
Yeah.
you've got a couple different properties that are your own, and you do some coaching and speaking
Yeah.
as well. It kind of unfolded.
Yeah, so we built the portfolio to about 3.5 million, which kind of bootstrapped everything to that point. But it's like I'm like, all right, I just want to partner because it's doing all the heavy lifting yourself. I'm up for the challenge, but hey, if I can do something less exhausting and get further,
More
that's
leverage.
great. So that's what we built the portfolio leverage. Yeah, built the portfolio to like 3.5 million, and currently actually have two properties in a contract. One of them is going to be one of them is a hard money loan, a major rehab. Part of the roof is caving in. I love those deals. And another one is I'm partnering with a bunch of guys on it. It's 15 acres, so we'll probably subdivide some of it. And then we have another third one going under contract. This is a motel, 32 room motel. So why the motel if I'm in the
Mm-hmm.
STR space? Well, especially a motel, you can make it that they have their own entrance, they have everything to themselves, just like an
Mm-hmm.
STR. So really looking, the goal is to buy the property and really up the quality and maybe even toying with the idea of throwing a couple shipping containers on top just to add some texture and fun to it.
So you basically
So
want to turn it into a multifamily STR.
yeah, a close comparison would be an apartment building with
So
STRs in it.
I guess that's
Uh,
effectively what a
it's
motel
not.
is anyway, right?
Yeah,
So let's can you
yeah.
define that a little more? So, for those who might not know, I mean, everyone pretty much, especially the people listening, real estate, for tech professionals, which is the show, has has probably been in an Airbnb. Airbnb is obviously tech company. But what's the difference here? STR versus Airbnb? Are there other terms that are very similar as well? Like, what's the difference? Are they all the
Hmm.
same, just using
Hmm.
different contexts? Help me understand.
Vacation rental, STR. When people think of vacation rental, they think of a destination property.
Mm-hmm.
When people think of so STR is kind of the all encompassing for everything. It's a short term rental as
So
opposed to a
that
long
is the
term
asset
rental.
class, basically.
That is the asset class. Then you have vacation rentals. It kind of gets mixed and used like interchangeably, but really, vacation rental in its true sense is a higher end property where you go to that property for vacation. Whereas maybe you're traveling through Lancaster City, it's like, hey, here's a cheap Airbnb, let me just stay there.
Got it.
Or whatever your motivation is to book it. Maybe I like that amenity,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But you're not on vacation. You might actually be on
Yep.
business. Whereas a vacation rental, it's more amenity rich by
Right.
definition, and all that. But now, what's the difference between that and Airbnb? So just as Kleenex is the household name for tissues, so Airbnb is for
There we go.
short-term rentals. That's a simple
Got it.
definition.
Because it was just B&B before. It was just a bed and breakfast. Uh,
You you mean the model, or you're talking about Airbnb
the model.
itself?
So I remember when I was way young, we went to certain places and literally stayed at a B&B. I'm like, so wait, we're going to stay in this
Mm,
room for this person. We're going to wake up and we're actually going to have breakfast here. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
yeah, 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 yeah. So the difference between Airbnb model and B&B model is B&B you have management there on the grounds, and you also get breakfast or whatever else. Whereas Airbnb, the general business model is here is your place. You might never see me, and you have it
Right.
all to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're doing rooms, then it's a little bit
It's a
different.
place to
But
sleep. It's a place to whatever else
yeah,
you
yeah,
need. Right.
there's not a whole lot of money in doing rooms on Airbnb or otherwise. It's just unless I've done it and I do it at times, and when I do it, I'm doing cheap.
Got it. What, so you're looking at that motel as well to, I don't know, we'll call it convert, or it doesn't really, we'll just call it convert.
Yeah, convert it
Um,
is.
and so STR, short-term rentals, come in for a short term, usually 2, 3, 4, less than 7 days, around there, to come in, do
Probably,
your
yeah.
thing,
Could be
pay by
otherwise.
the
Yeah.
night, right? And
Right.
I mean, some of the, obviously you've been in the space for a bit. You started with the trades thing. You talked a little about your, the origins of getting there. If I talk a bit about on the podcast, the channels with different guests as well. We talk about the different assets, why people would want to invest in them, why they wouldn't, and how it fits in the portfolio. So, who's the right, when looking at a portfolio perspective, you can have things that are more reliable, that are more bond-esque, right? Like value add multifamily, getting, maybe not get
Mm-hmm.
a big paycheck like you would if you were like doing land development, where you might be 2, 3 or xing your equity. But like, who's the
Mm-hmm.
right, where does STRs fit in the real estate portfolio for people?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great question. Um, yeah, I mean, they say if you, when it comes to investing, diversify. When it comes to running a business, specify. Actually, that's my rendition of
Okay.
it. Like hyper
Mm-hmm.
focus. So I am hyper focused only short term rentals. Sometimes I think I should diversify, but I'm afraid by diversifying I dilute my focus, right? But anyway, back to the question. There's advantages to to investing in short term rentals. One of that is there's greater tax advantages for some people because it is considered an active investment. And I'm not far from a
This is not
CPA. I
legal
don't know
advice. None of
all.
this is legal advice. Education
This
only.
is not legal advice. I
Just
don't even
two
know what I'm talking
guys
about.
talking to each other, right?
Right. There's some pretty significant tax advantages. One of those is the like you can write your, so you spend a significant amount of money on furnishing. You can write that all off the first year if you want.
Okay.
And then also it can be considered an active investment as opposed to a passive. How that all plays into I'm not actually sure.
Okay.
Um, but I know it's a factor. And and honestly, here's one little thing to think about for an investor. Short term rentals are fun. Why, let's have
Yeah. So
fun.
let's talk about that. So
Uh,
you're saying, as an investor, right? So you've got, I think your companies are Kingsley. Is that right?
Kingly,
Kingly, excuse me.
Kingly, yeah.
Um,
Which we're rebranding to Rewonder. There's a whole whatever wrapped up in that
no
name. But
problem.
anyway,
Kingly, and so, or whoever we'll call it, the operators, just to keep the generic language for a moment, is the one
mm-hmm.
that's going out, looking at specific markets, going to acquire the houses, or looking at the markets, getting all the different properties to underwrite or do the analysis, thinking about the business model, going to execute it, doing the operations, etc. So you know part of that is raising equity, raising funds, right? People
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
trust
Right,
and or
right,
believe in, that that you can do what you say you're going to do, and you've showed them the stuff, and they can think through it as well, right? um, and
yep,
so if they're putting up 25, 50, 100K or whatever for those investments, or you're saying that they get a piece of some of that writing off for the investment as well? Okay.
correct,
So they get to
correct,
share
yep,
in the cash flow. They get to share in some of the tax benefits, like the losses as well.
correct.
And
I don't know all the details on
talk
that
to your
though,
CPA.
so
Absolutely.
talk to your
As usual.
CPA.
Yep. But in general, those are some of the benefits here as well. And all of the
Correct.
specifics, talk to your own tax and legal, right?
Yeah. So the way I envision it is, I know that multifamily or self storage or
Yep.
whatever, they all. I wish I had some in my portfolio. I just don't want to dilute my energies and my focus right
Mm-hmm.
now. Um, but to me, the perfect investment would be, you have multifamily, you have self storage, you have some of the other asset classes, maybe even some oil and gas, and then you have a little bit into short term rentals because it's just it's a different thing. There's a faster tax write off. Uh, there's potentially a higher payoff. Like most of our properties, we've been running at a 20% IRR or greater, or a lot greater actually for some of them. So I know that some investors are happy with
Mm-hmm.
8%. I mean, but they're investing in a very, very, very stable asset class by doing that. That has very little risk. The short-term rental might have a tad more risk, just because it's a bit more volatile, but it's also potentially a much higher
What are some
payoff.
of the things about risk, some of the risk factors, so that people?
Well, it's just more volatile. Um, so if the economy goes down for a long-term rental, maybe your long-term rent drops by $50, right,
Sure.
per
Yeah.
month. Whereas for short-term rental, it might drop by 1,000.
Got it.
Again, 1,000 compared to what? Well, sure, but it can be more drastic. But then when you have up, you really have up. So it's just a bit more of a volatile game.
So
And the other thing is there are risks like townships deciding no more, different things like that. Now there's ways around that. There's ways to navigate that well, but that is one of the things that can impact it. Or something crazy like I mentioned earlier on, where Airbnb suspended listings
mhm.
for us. It's just different things. Now there's ways to navigate all that stuff to diversify your risk, but it's just a different game. It really is a different game. It's so when you do multifamily, you're really doing real estate. When you do short term rentals, you're doing real estate, hospitality, and tech at the same time. So it's almost in some ways not comparable.
Mm-hmm.
Although most people think of it as real estate, it is real estate, but it's much much more than that. It's just a
Talk
different
to me.
game. I think everyone should put at least one or two deals in their portfolio, just because I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but that's, I mean, obviously I am, but that's how I think about it, because it gives you a fuller portfolio.
You've mentioned before that uh, you know, well, sort of the top level question for me that I'm thinking here is, how have some of the things that you've learned through the trades, through education, and I think maybe even I think you'd mentioned something about how you and your wife work together on this too. The skills that you have learned from life or through intentful education. How do you bring that into the STR space? You said it's real estate, but it's really a business around tech and hospitality.
Yeah. So what was the question again? There's a number of
Sure,
things.
sure. So directly, the question is, what skills have you learned in the past from life that you have brought into the short-term rental space?
Before the short term rental or during the short term rental?
During, like as you're doing things
During.
now.
Yeah. Well, a huge one for me is mindset. If I would have known, even when we started 7 years ago, the goal never was to build a business. That wasn't even in my thinking. It just turned into that. Um, but some days it's just fear's hard, and it's just being able to just keep moving forward. With this recent thing with the Airbnb fiasco with us, it's bogging me down, and I'm a bit overwhelmed. And this morning I was really struggling, and it's just like, Elam, so what? What does that matter? You might feel down, but what does that matter? You're in control of your feelings. Just move on. Put the next foot in front of the other and push through it. It'll get better. So Yeah, just pushing through hard stuff.
Yeah, like you said, being entrepreneurial in that way of, well, I need experience, so I got to go do it, and then being resilient.
Yeah, and take risk. Not stupid risk. Just you're not going to get anywhere
Yeah.
without risk.
What I want to be respectful of time. So
Yeah, I do need to jump here shortly. I have another call. I mean, it's not rush, but I need to get here off.
sounds good. So talk to me about what keeps you going today, and what advice do you have for new people jumping into investing?
I just went out for breakfast this morning with a young guy that he lives in a neighboring city, and his vision is to transform Harrisburg. Harrisburg is the city he's living in, and it needs a lot of help. It's not like a slum city, but it has some slum areas. It's a huge city, and anyway, he was just talking to me about his vision a little bit, or we did in the past, and he's just shared with me how it's attracting people to what he's doing. He has vision. And for me, my vision is to create a hospitality brand that ignites people's souls. So we often think of hospitality as a bed and maybe breakfast. That's physical. But we have much, much greater needs than just our physicality. We have emotional needs, spiritual needs, and my goal is to create a hospitality brand that fires up people's souls. Like in America, we're kind of like our souls dying.
There's a lot of commercialism.
Yeah, and there's disillusionment with our politics, and people are frustrated with politics right now, and understandably. But creating spaces where, and one of the ways of doing that is create beauty, because we're attracted to beauty and it can really touch us deeply. But creating spaces where people can come and get rest, experience love, joy, and peace. That's what keeps me going. That vision to create that. Sure, I watch my numbers. Sure, I look at the business. Sure, I do all that. I have to. But there's like this overpowering, overarching, beyond the struggle today vision that keeps me going.
Awesome. Creating those transformative spaces as well. And then any advice you have? I think you were talking about that, that person you went to breakfast with, someone sitting across the table, someone else, just those listening that are looking at their first, second, third investment, just pretty new. What do you tell them about, or what advice do you wish you had when you first started, personally, professionally?
Yeah. You could say, well, I wish I would have known that, wish I would have known this. Yeah, whatever. But I feel like the biggest mistakes I have made have not been in the things I have done, but in the things I have not done. And I think there is a key dividing line between successful real estate people and non-successful. The main difference, the bedrock foundation for all of them is people of action as opposed to people of non-action.
Take action.
Take action.
Take calculated risk.
Go do it imperfectly. I mean, that first house that we built or that we bought, we went way over budget. I was stressed out financially, but we made so much money on that property. I would do it all over again. I would go through the same stress again, maybe. But I would, because I learned so much. It's made me who I am today. Now rather than stressing out over a $54,000 deal, I'm stressing out over a
a couple million.
Right,
exactly. Sound advice. Thank you, Elam. Appreciate you. For those who want to chat more with you, learn more about what you're doing, anyone who's interested in doing things, with you and your team as well, where can people find you?
The best right now is Facebook, and the handle is Elam Z King. So ELAM Z as in zebra, King. Elam Z King. So facebook.com/Elam Z King. And I do check the friend requests or message requests and different things like that. Hey, hit me up. I feel like we're at the beginning. We've been in this for 6 years, but I feel like we're at the beginning of so much more. And That's the vision.
Let's
Let's
go do it.
it.
At the beginning, taking down multi-million-dollar deals. I love it. The passion never stops. Keep on doing it. Do it messy.
Yep.
Take the risks, and go and learn.
Yep.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.